Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle émission du format Super Friends. C'est dans cette émission que l'on va à la rencontre des personnes qui font vivre la pop culture et la culture comics par leur travail. Et on reprend la tournée des interviews puisqu'on a plein de libraires et d'éditeurs qui font venir les artistes en France. Et avec Album Comics et Urban Comics, on a le plaisir d'avoir dans ce podcast Nick Dragotta, superbe artiste qu'on a pu voir sur du Marvel, mais aussi sur la série East of West de Jonathan Hickman et qui est en train d'exploser dans le mainstream aujourd'hui avec sa participation exceptionnelle sur Absolute Batman. Donc on va parler de ça, parce qu'on n'a pas non plus énormément de temps pour refaire toute sa carrière, mais en tout cas on va pouvoir parler de dessin et de bande dessinée. Une fois que le générique se lancera, je vous laisse en compagnie de Nick, en anglais bien entendu. Hello, Nick. It's really nice to have you here in our podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
So this is the first time that we speak together. So we have to start from the beginning. Of course, it's the question I have to ask. So let's start from the beginning. Were you a comic book reader before being a comic book artist?
Yes.
What can you tell us about your childhood, how you grew with comics in the United States?
I grew up in New Jersey in a small town called Cape May. And one of my earliest memories is having a bookstore that I could walk to from around the corner of my home. And they had a spinner rack. And I could grab comics, sit on the floor, and just read them all day. And this was, going back to some of my earliest memories, I probably wasn't much older than 6 or 7. The bookstore was that close to my house. And so I had a wealth of books and comics to look at. And I remember the earliest books were anything related to the toys, G.I. Joe, Transformers, the Marvel stuff. Whenever I'd come across, I remember seeing a Barry Windsor Smith X-Men issue and just being like, this is too much. I couldn't understand it. And then I kind of fell out of comics, and we moved to a different area in New Jersey, which we didn't have access to bookstores, but then did kind of get back into comics with the Image boom in the 90s and kind of rediscovered it. And ever since then, I've been a reader. So from 16 on, I've been hardcore reading comics.
And do you remember at what point you decided to be a comic book artist and not just simply read them?
Yeah, I was, rather than going to high school, I went on work release, and I was working at a chemical glassware factory drawing blueprints, and I thought maybe this would become my job. I always loved to draw, and I was getting paid to draw, but I was just drawing scientific glassware. And as I read more comics, I started drawing more comics in the margins of when I should have been working. And then as I got to 18, 19, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for being a comic book artist. And I can't stress enough, the importance of Image at the time, because it was during that boom. So you had Rob Liefeld on television doing Levi's commercials. You could see the lines and the mass hysteria for comics, and they were selling in the millions. And it was an artist driven industry then. So it was very inspiring, and it was like, I'm going to go for this. And I decided to go to a convention in Philadelphia, and I brought a little bit my portfolio, and I was not good enough, nowhere near good enough coming out of high school. But an art school, Savannah College of Art and Design, saw my work, and they were like, if you come to our school, we'll give you a scholarship. So that was kind of the impetus from the start. Yeah.
So you did have art studies before going a professional?
Yeah, I went to art school, Savannah College of Art and Design, and I studied there.
But we know that so sometimes in art studies, the teachers don't like comics. So I don't know if you study specifically the language of. So he's laughing. He's laughing. So maybe I'm touching something.
They didn't like manga, but they loved comics, and that was a really interesting learning thing of why don't you like these Japanese comics that started to then take over the scene, and look how cool they are. And it was like, keep it traditional, do this, do that. But coming out of art school, it was called Savannah College of Art and Design, and it was the sequential art major. So it was specifically studying comic books, but the program at the time was very new. And the teachers were grad students. So they had never really worked professionally. The one professional was Mark Neese, who was a professional writer. He was an excellent. All the teachers were good. And then as the program developed, but I was a junior, senior, then we started to get professionals in the industry. Darwin Talon and Patrick Welch was really great. I can remember, but like indie comics, not so much mainstream American superhero stuff. But I will say they did weekends where they brought professionals in. So all throughout my school, I met Will Eisner, got portfolio reviews from Will Eisner, met David Mazzucchelli, Scott Hampton, Catherine Jones, just the most incredible artists would come through that school, sit with you, go over technique, look at your work, once a year. So that alone made it worth it. And then also travel. I did a little overseas study, came to France. I did studied in Provence for a little bit, went over to Italy, and just for a semester. But that was, really eye-opening too. So just getting out there, getting more culture. Maybe not necessarily the best. I don't know how you teach comic books. You really have to just nail your ass to a chair and sit there and get through it. Because after I graduated at 22, didn't get my first job till I was 28.
So before we'll talk about what happened during these 6 years, but would you say that maybe your travels in France and Italy and having access, maybe more access to the European comic book also had an influence on your drawing? Absolutely.
I mean, this was pre-internet, right? So this is late 90s, pre-internet. And I think a lot of younger people don't realize the wealth of visual stuff they get now. And in the late 90s, you really had to track this stuff down, go to bookstores, or hope you had friends that had collections. So thank you. And that was, coming to France and discovering new artists. I mean, of course, we always knew of Mobius, but even a Mobius book was really hard to come by. So, absolutely. And I think that's a good culmination of my work. Like I've discovered different comics throughout the world at different points in my career, and then I really integrate it into my own work.
Okay, so what happened between your graduation and your first work during the 6 years? Did you just try hard?
Yeah, I mean, I think Alex Toth said it best. You really have to nail your ass to a chair, sit there, and shut out the outside world and just draw. So lots of life drawing. I was fortunate to stay in the town that I went to school in, Savannah College of Art and Design. So I would still, without paying for going to school, I was a graduate. I still got access to those editor days where they bring professional editors in to review portfolios. The sequential art weekends where they'd bring all the pros in and look at portfolios. So I still took full advantage of the school, doing lots of life drawing, and continued to make comics. I was also fortunate that we had a professional coloring studio, comic book coloring studio in that town, and I got a job there. So Xylenol Studio, headed up by the colorist Lee Lowridge, who at the time was all the Vertigo books. I mean, early Vertigo. Like, he's one of the best colorists maybe for the last 30 years. And he had a studio with a bunch of us, and we all were making money coloring comics. And then at night I'd go home and draw comics. So it was, and we scanned all the artwork back then. Nothing was sent digitally. We used to have to put it on a disc. We'd scan it, put it on a disc, and send it back to DC. They'd send us the artboards. So you can imagine we did everything from Stack 100 Bullets, Eduardo Risso, to Paul Pope, to, Dexter's Lab, with Gendy Tartakovsky, I believe his name is. Just the plethora of DC comics and art. And then as a young kid holding all those art boards, I think about that now, and I'm like, what another education to then see, like, this is what it takes. This is what it takes to be a pro. You don't realize Eduardo Risso's genius until you really look at the artwork and the simplicity and the beauty of it. And then, that was always just a good learning experience. And then over those 6 years of when I graduated to when I became a pro, just working and constantly being critical of myself to be like, I got to get better. I got to get better.
And how do you know that you're getting better? Is it because you got, let's say, less rejections from projects you applied? Is it from just the commentary that you got from editors or from your peers, from your artist colleagues? When did you know that you were getting better?
You kind of don't know that. It's more like a belief in yourself that you can do this, and then being realistic, I think, where you're at with your skill set. And so I kind of knew I had it in me. My primary focus was always on the storytelling and less about trying to draw cool or make more marks. And because I always looked at people like Alex Toth, and, you know, at the time when I got work, Darwin Cook was very big. So there was kind of like this throwback to more simplicity and an animated style. And I think, you know, I can remember the submissions that got me work. Like, I perfected these 5 pages. Like I was like, if an editor looks at these and says no, then I don't want to work with them. Like, I was that confident. And then it was what I learned in doing this whole process is find editors that have your sensibilities. Like, there were superhero editors I would show this submission packet to that would be like, nope, you know, it's okay, but no, I can't use this. And they were more interested in the more detailed, like maybe house style at the time, people still influenced by Image or whomever was hot at that time. But I knew what I was doing, and I knew there were other pros working like within this style. So, yeah. And then it was Axel Alonso who gave me my first job. He had just started at Marvel, and then the rest is history. So
what was your first that first project? Do you remember how it came to be? So Alonso contacted you?
So he came down to visit SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, where I was still living. That's another really nice thing about when I came up. Rent was super cheap. The cost of living was super cheap. You know, like, you could have a roommate and have a part-time job and still live like a king. Like, the world was affordable. And Savannah, Georgia is beautiful. It's a really great place. So I feel very fortunate to come up then. And then, Axel came down to the school to review portfolios for kids in school. I was way graduated at that point. But you still are friendly with the professors, and they go, yeah, sure, come by, show your stuff. And I showed it, and he said, I remember what he said to me. He said, good news is I'm going to hire you. I want to be the guy that breaks you into comics. The bad news is I don't have anything right now, so sit tight. It took a year, you know, and then I went home, and we emailed back and forth for about a year until the right project came up. And that was Ecstatics. I did a fill-in when Mike Allred took a break on the book. So
with Peter Milligan?
Yeah, Peter Milligan. Yep. Yeah, Peter Milligan wrote it. And I drew the story. Yeah.
And from that point, were you choosing the next projects you were applying for, or how does it work?
That job came out terrible. It was not good. I wasn't really ready. You know, you can work on a submission packet for a whole year, and it's a few pages, but then when you get thrown into the fire and have to do 20 pages within 6 weeks, you kind of like learn who you are. And it was a little, I always stand by the storytelling, but it was a little rushed. And then after that, I went to DC, did 2 issues of The Losers off of Jock's layouts. So I was the first to do a fill-in after he had done the book for over a year on The Losers. It was a big hit for him and Andy Diggle. And then I came in and did a few issues. Again, not good. Like, I would say the problem with those jobs for me was the inks, the finishes. And they just weren't that tight. They were kind of like a little loose. And I think readers were like, oof, this guy's not so hot. So,
but it was important for you to do your inks because sometimes, even if you wanted to be quicker, you can leave the inks to an inker.
Well, also too, I haven't seen anyone ink me that I really felt like that's what I was going for. Gary Martin might have been the best on Age of the Century, but again, that was like we were doing a 1950s style, like we were aping a certain style. It wasn't like the Nick you know now. So that led into like my Marvel was like, we like your storytelling. I remember the editor saying this, like, we like your storytelling, but your finishes are not up to par. So we're going to find you an inker. And that's what led into a string of work where Mike Allred went back to Mad Men, but was getting all these offers at Marvel. And he said, look, I like Dragotta's pencils and I like his storytelling. I'll finish him for all these projects you're offering me. So I got like all the projects Mike couldn't do, I penciled. And it was really great. I mean, I did Stan Lee stories, Dead Girl presents, Ecstatics presents Dead Girl. Like just some really, really fun books with Peter Milligan, Stan Lee, like you name it. I did some Mad Men stuff with Mike and his brother Lee. So that was like a whole nother growing period and just, banking it. And then when you get boards back with Mike Allred inks, then it's just like what I was saying earlier about seeing Eduardo Risso is like, wow, this is professional. This is what it takes. So it's just a whole nother, comics are a journey. I think if you want to do this, you have to be kind to yourself and realize like it's going to take a while.
Can you tell us a little bit about your the way you met Jonathan Hickman? I guess it was on Fantastic Four before you got to do East of West together.
Yeah. So again, it goes back to my storytelling. And I can't remember what it was I did at Marvel, but there was a fill-in needed on Jonathan's run of Fantastic Four. And Steve Epting, I believe, was doing the book. And it was Johnny Storm died. And they had an all silent issue. So no words. And out of nowhere, Marvel called and was like, we have this all silent issue. We love your storytelling. Like, we think you can nail this. And again, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think what I did before that got me that. And I can't quite remember. But yeah, I got the call for that job. And that was the first time I met Hickman. So I got to really kind of show what I can do because there was no words on the page. It was the morning. It was the day after Johnny died and everyone was mourning. And I remember Jonathan had some fantastic like visual beats in it. Like Sue was crying on the bed and Reed goes to hug her or touch her, but she has a force field up. And so his fingers just kind of wrap around her, but can't get close to her. And so like, it really, after that issue, it was like a lot of readers really liked it. And then Marvel then said, we're spinning Fantastic Four off into FF and we want you to launch that. At the time, though, I was doing Vengeance with Joe Casey. And I said, no, I can't leave Joe Casey hanging. And I really like what we're doing on Vengeance. And they said, okay, well, the seat's open when you finish Vengeance, jump over to FF with Hickman. And I think Jonathan and I did maybe 9 or 10 issues on FF, like a year's worth of work. And really hit it off. John's awesome. He's not only is he like really imaginative, but he's very honest, easygoing, and completely easy to work with. Like, he makes the work fun and it's never a chore. And he puts the ultimate visual responsibility on me. And like, that's what I really enjoy. And then he's chock full of like awesome ideas, big ideas, visual ideas. He used to draw comics. So like he really comes from that viewpoint of it. And then he likes working Marvel style too, like we did on East to West. So yeah, so into East to West, we were doing FF and not a lot of money for me, maybe good for John, but I had reached kind of the plateau at Marvel, I thought, and they didn't want to give me a raise or anything. And I wasn't happy with like what they were going to offer me next. So John said, hey, I just did an image book with Nick Pitara called Manhattan Projects, and it sold, we're selling 20,000 plus copies. So this is now the difference between, we're talking work for hire, which is Marvel, and then Image is creator owned. So in America, work for hire, you get paid a page rate and a royalty. Now, to get a royalty, you have to sell, I think back then it's 60,000+. We were maybe doing that on FF, maybe. So I wasn't seeing any kind of sizable royalty. The page rate wasn't great.
And it still isn't.
Yeah. No, it's not.
We've heard complaints from your colleagues this year from, I think that was Destin Nguyen, maybe. He wrote on his social media what he had been offered, and he was also complaining about not getting royalties on the sales to the international from his books. So it's still quite difficult to work for hire.
Foreign, I don't know those numbers. So it's interesting. We can get into this later, but it's like, you go in to negotiate your contract, but if you don't know the sales figures, how do you know what you're worth? So, and then, back then I was new. So, and the creators that are making the higher page rates have been at these companies for decades. And that's what they always say. One, they say you got to put asses in seats. So you got to sell books. And then two is like, you got to show like you're committed and you're not going to just jump ship and blah, blah, blah. I was ready to jump ship. So Jonathan and I then went to Image, and at Image, it's creator owned, and you can pretty much equate the sales to every copy sold, you're essentially getting $1 back. 20,000 books, $20,000 a month. That's splitting that. So every Image deal, I'm going in at least 50%, at least, so that's what I'm asking for. And then John was, all about it. He said, sure, 50-50 split on everything. We co-own it. And we went to Image and did East to West, and we did that for 50 issues. And this is the difference. Like, we sold equal to what we were doing on Fantastic Four. And the first issue of East to West, after its fourth printing, I think did 78,000 copies. That month, me and John split $78,000, 36 grand each. That's life-changing money. So that was the beginning of like, wow, comics can pay. Now, going back to school and not getting my first job till I'm 28, I didn't do East to West till I was 35, 36. So it's a decade of, toiling, learning, thankful to Marvel also, like getting work, getting great editorial feedback, growing as an artist, Mike Allred, the connections, meeting Jonathan. And
you never let go also.
Yeah. So
it just stick to it.
Yeah. It's just like, it's part of it, and it paid off for me, So, and that's, I think every creator owes it to themselves. And now I'm talking the world stage. You can be from Europe, you can be from anywhere, and you can do a creator-owned book in America. And if you can, a book that sells fractionally what you might sell at a Marvel or DC will pay out way better because you own it. So
it seems to me like you had a tremendous experience with East of West, but still, years later, you came back to work for hire with Absolute Batman, which we are celebrating right now in France. It's one of the biggest sales in France, and I think it's also selling well in the United States. What made you come back to work for hire?
Well, going back to Image, that's where I learned who I was as an artist, because I really had the creative freedom to draw what I want. So that's where I kind of was like, I learned a lot. Basically 45 issues, working with Jonathan Hickman, working Marvel style, meaning John would just give me a loose plot each issue. I'd draw it. He kind of wouldn't know what I'm giving back to him. He'd script it. And doing that really is like the best way to learn. Like, again, going back to what To said, nail your ass to a chair and just draw the books. The beauty about Image is I get to draw what I want, and working with Jonathan, got to kind of draw what I want, like really go,
He was asking you, what do you want to draw? And I put
it was kind of like
put that in the book.
Wherever I wanted to set a scene, like I followed the plot, like he kind of would go A to B, but within, I knew the direction I was going in, but I could swerve any way I wanted. I dictated the fight scenes. I dictated, like I would go, John, we got to do a train robbery in the sky, because we had like floating ships, and cool. All right. When we got to that point, he's like, all right, Nick, here's your train robbery issue. You got about 10 pages to do your scene. Go ahead. And then he'd script on top of it. So it's like complete creative freedom. And I guess my point is that gave me the portfolio for then Scott Snyder to go like, oh, check out this Nick Dragotta guy. Because Scott, I'd never met Scott before. After East to West, I went and did Ghost Cage. That's the first time I wrote and drew, and with a co-writer named Caleb Gallner. And Caleb, really, we talk plot. But I was kind of really being the one like, this is what I want to do. And he was there to, help write and then also script. And then David Brothers was the editor, who's a fantastic comic book writer in his own right and an awesome editor. His full-time job is Viz Comics. So we had an all-star team to help me kind of write and draw my first comic. But those guys contributed to the writing, and Caleb especially was the co-writer on it. And then Scott, when he called me out of the blue, he texted me. He said, "Hey, this is Scott Snyder." And I'm like, "Whoa, okay."
What kind of scam is it?
And he's just like, "Do you mind if I call you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's hear what you want." And it's interesting because after you write and draw your own stuff, it's hard to go back, because you're in total control. And you see things like Ghost Cage and you're like, there's nothing like that on the shelves. You want to create more stuff like that. So when Scott called and he's like, "Oh, I'm going back to DC and I want to do we're going to relaunch the Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman." And I was just kind of like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to do that." I didn't yet grasp what he wanted to do. And he said, "But this is going to be a new reimagining of them." So he's like the Ultimates line, but not. We are going to radically change their origins. And he started to explain each book. And when he got to Batman, I was like, "Scott, you're telling me he's going to lose his parents in a school shooting?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I'm in." The book is going to be culturally relevant. And he's not going to have the millions. He's not going to be the billionaire Bruce Wayne. He's going to be a kid off the streets growing up with his rogues galleries. They're going to be his childhood friends. And I'm just like, "Scott, I want to do Batman." And he's like, "Okay." Cause he was offering basically just garnering interest, any interest in Wonder Woman, Superman, or Batman. And I said, "But you have to write this." Because the way he was talking about it was so passionate. And he was like, "I don't know. I don't know." And he was like, "You think so?" And I was like, "Yeah, if you write it, I'm in. I'm all in." And that was it. He talked to Tinian, and basically James Tinian told him the same thing and said, "You have to write the Batman book. The ideas are like the way, how passionate you are about it. You got to do it." And that was it. I was 2 years before the book came out. And then another really nice thing about this project is Scott lives close by to me. So I can go to his house and we can sit in his studio and just talk comics, talk about the book, cook up the plot. So again, East to West, I am fully integrated in the development of the plot and injecting my ideas. And I think that's a really part of the special sauce about it. And Scott, just being 100% open to us being full co-creators on this book. It's been an awesome experience.
What would you say is your a creative mood for reimagining the whole Batman universe and the Batman characters? Would you say
mood?
The mood, because everything seems so bigger, bolder. I don't know, with the Batman appearance, he's massive. We also just saw the Bane and the Killer Croc, and it just seemed to be okay. So everything will just have injected testosterone, or I don't know what kind of NASCAR.
I mean, if you look at what comics, again, I'm a kid of the '90s, right? So.
Yeah, it really strikes me as what you were saying before with the Rob Liefeld on television.
And then you read manga and you're just kind of American comics to me feel sometimes that they go so writer driven and they forget the visual aspect of it. You can see the words start to even crowd out the pictures in some books. And I'm just kind of let's get back to this being a visual medium and just drawing striking images to where readers or just even passersby are like, "Whoa, that's Batman. what's going, let me see. Let me open up that cover. Let's see what's going on. And that was part of Scott's pitch from the beginning. He was like, this Batman's going to be huge. And when I say I drew him big the first time, Scott saw it and was like, Nick, bigger. And I'm like, Scott, we're getting into Hulk proportions. Like, this is a big dude. And, at first, you grow up with Batman, you kind of reject it because you're like, you have to, have him perching on gargoyles and jumping across the city and fitting in a Batmobile. And then once you start drawing it and getting comfortable with it, you get comfortable with the way the character moves, and, you can start breaking all these rules. And, but just going back to drawing stuff that makes readers stop and go, what is this? And I think like what I see in manga, what I see in the comics in the 90s, or the, the artists I like, they always drew striking images, and you can do that through proportion, through speed lines, through, composition, all that. And like, let's get back to that. Let's get away from mimicking what the films do and realism.
And there's also a way that it seems quite absurd to have such a big Batman, whereas when we see Bruce Wayne as Bruce, he's just like a normal guy. So, but I guess it's just, it's comic books. We don't care about that.
Absolutely. It makes sense. He's big. I draw him big even as Bruce.
But it's not that big. You know what I mean?
But yeah, when he armors up, he goes huge. And that's just the fun of it. I mean, then that was something we set out to do. Like, let's make him scary again. Let's make him brooding. Let's make him big. And also, I got to say, I really went back to Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli's work and looked at it. And it's the directness and the boldness of like the storytelling and the immediacy of the line work and the emotion. And it's simple. And it's cartooning and it's direct, and and really trying to merge the words and the pictures. Like Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli might be like the perfect comic book. It's just it's perfection. And then to just looking at that and trying to go back and achieve that, like making the words and the pictures work together and hit beats.
Would you say there have been any limitations in what you could do with Absolute Batman in terms of designs? Because I guess there were a lot of discussions between you and Scott, but also with the editor. So I don't know.
Absolutely not. I mean, for issue 1, we were for sure they were not going to let us show him chopping off someone's hand. The latest issue I just drew has a pretty gratuitous, not gratuitous, but it's got a really nice sex scene in it. And they made me throw a couple shadows in certain places. But like, no, no. I mean, our editor, Katie Kubert, Andrew Marino, they've been absolutely fantastic and supportive and just pushing us to even go further. Like it's not at all. And
I was wondering also, because you told me that with Jonathan, you worked the Marvel way, and I don't know if that's the same thing with Absolute Batman, because I counted like you've got some pages with 19 panels and some other it's just a big splash pages. So how do you work with
same way. It's like Scott gives me a beat sheet. It's basically each issue will be like, pages 1 to 2 is this scene, pages 3 to 6 is this scene. We got a fight scene in here. And like for issue 1, we kept growing it because the original fight scene maybe we're on the steps, which has that 19 panel page. We had all these ideas, and I was drawing all this stuff and what he could do with his cape. It became, rather than the utility belt, it became the utility suit. So every aspect of it is like a weapon or a tool he can use. And his cape can now throw things. He can walk on his cape. He can, like a bat, he can kind of use it as this tool. And we wanted to show all the different aspects of this new Batman. And originally that fight scene was 6 pages and the issue was going to be like, 30-page issue. And by the end of that fight scene, I think it grew to 10 or 12, and we went up to like a 42-page issue. But that's the beauty of working in this. And like I said, editorial just being like completely supportive and behind us. And you get the 19-panel pages because we had so many ideas and we were running out of room. So I'm like, I'm going to fit this in. But again, going back to Mazzucchelli, Frank Miller, like good design, and you can get away with that. It doesn't feel cluttered and it works. So.
So the designs always has to fit the story and to be like in service of the story.
Absolutely. That's the number one rule. Serve the story. Serve the story. And I say that both as artist, and then I think Scott thinks the same way as a writer. Like, you don't want to you don't need the superfluous words. You don't need to have cute little dialogue back and forth. You want to just be direct, immediate, serve the story.
How long do you think you're going to stay on Absolute Batman? And do you have any other ideas for a new creator-owned project, maybe?
Absolutely. We're in talks now about my next DC contract, but me and Scott have mapped it out for 35 to 40 issues. So, and that, as we look at the story, I'm kind of looking at it as like a trilogy, and this would be like the first part of that trilogy. So, this Batman's here to stay, I think. But yeah, I know me and Scott have the story for me at least 35, 36 issues.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Nick. It was a pleasure.